The late afternoon sun dipped low over the sprawling estate, gilding the manicured lawns with a soft golden sheen. The gates of the Harrington residence towered like silent guardians, wrought in iron and etched with the family crest, two interlocked lions holding a shield. Beyond them, the driveway curved gracefully toward a mansion that looked less like a home and more like an empire of marble and glass. Inside that house lived Alexander Harrington, one of the wealthiest men on the eastern seaboard. To the business world, he was a titan of steel and finance, a man whose voice could raise or sink the fortunes of industries with a single word. But within the walls of his private palace, he was merely a father weighed down with an unspoken sorrow. Before we continue with this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and like the video, because when you stop doing this, YouTube understands that you don't like this content and stops recommending good stories like this. Oh, and don't forget to comment below where you're watching us from. We love to know that, for Alexander's only son Ethan was not like other children. At 11 years old, Ethan's world was wrapped in silence. He spoke only in rare whispers, if at all, and when he did, the words came out fractured, as though his tongue were reluctant to serve him. He could spend hours lining up toy cars in perfect rows, staring at the wheels as they spun, oblivious to the world around him. To Alexander, who had built his life on control, clarity, and power, this mystery of a child felt like a constant reminder of his helplessness. The house was staffed with the best, chefs from Paris, a private nurse trained in child development, and a rotating list of therapists who promised breakthroughs that never arrived. Alexander could buy everything, except his son's smile. That morning had been particularly trying. Ethan had locked himself in the garage, once again captivated by the gleam of tools and the smell of grease. Alexander had returned from a meeting, tie loosened, phone buzzing in his hand, and had found his son crouched by the hood of a dormant vintage Aston Martin. "Ethan," Alexander had said in his deep, commanding voice. "Not there." "That's not safe," but the boy didn't move. He simply tapped the wrench against the floor in a steady rhythm, lost in his own world. Alexander had sighed, pinched the bridge of his nose, and beckoned the butler. "Where is she?" "The new maid?" The arrival of Maria. She had come only 2 days prior, recommended by a local agency, not the usual exclusive service Alexander preferred, but his house manager had been desperate to fill the vacancy after the last maid abruptly quit. Her name was Maria Alvarez, 26 years old, small-framed with tired eyes that betrayed years of hardship. She wore her dark hair in a neat bun and moved with quiet determination, as though every step had been rehearsed. She wasn't like the others who glided through the mansion in polished uniforms. She carried herself with humility, almost reverence, as if the house itself intimidated her. When Alexander first saw her, he barely looked twice. He was used to people coming and going. Help was replaceable. But today, standing at the threshold of the garage, he finally noticed her. "Sir," Maria said softly, dipping her head. Her accent carried the melody of another world, Spanish perhaps, but gentle. "Is something wrong?" Alexander gestured toward Ethan. "He won't listen. He doesn't understand danger. Just get him inside, will you? Before he hurts himself." Maria nodded and approached cautiously. She knelt a few feet away from the boy. Ethan did not turn. His eyes remained fixed on the gleaming wrench in his hand. "Señorito Ethan," she whispered, her voice lower than a song. "You like this tool? It's heavy, isn't it? Makes a sound when you tap it." The boy's hand paused mid-tap. Alexander froze. This was unusual. Typically, when strangers approached, Ethan retreated further into silence. Yet here he was still, as though listening. Maria continued, softer still. "You know my father. He had tools like this. I used to sit with him in our small garage. We would fix old cars. You like cars too?" Ethan tilted his head slightly, almost imperceptibly. And for the first time, Alexander Harrington felt the faint stirrings of something he hadn't known in years. Hope, the shadow of loss. That evening, as the household settled, Alexander stood by the vast floor-to-ceiling windows of his study. Beyond them stretched the night sky, peppered with stars above the private lake that glimmered like liquid silver. In his hand, a glass of whiskey swirled in slow circles. A photograph rested on his desk, his late wife Isabella smiling radiantly on the day Ethan was born. She had been the warmth to his steel, the laughter to his silence. Her death 5 years ago in a car accident had fractured him in ways no boardroom defeat ever could. He had thrown himself into work, into building, into amassing, yet nothing filled the hollow space she left behind. And now, Ethan. Ethan was the last piece of her he had, a living echo of a love lost too soon. But the boy remained locked away in a fortress of his mind, unreachable. The glass tightened in his grip. Billionaire, tycoon, visionary, the world revered him. Yet in the only role that mattered, father, he was failing. A knock broke his thoughts. "Come in." Maria entered, holding a tray with tea. She moved carefully, her steps respectful of the silence in the room. "I thought perhaps you would like something warm before you sleep, sir," she said. Alexander arched an eyebrow. "Do I look like a man who drinks tea?" Maria didn't flinch. "You look like a man who doesn't sleep easily." The words hit deeper than he expected. He studied her, this maid who dared speak plainly in a house of whispers. Her eyes carried no judgment, only quiet understanding. He set the whiskey aside and, to his own surprise, accepted the tea. The bond begins. The following days brought small but noticeable changes. Ethan, who normally avoided eye contact, began lingering near Maria. He would trail after her as she dusted the library or folded linens in the sunroom. She never forced words on him, never demanded responses. Instead, she narrated her tasks in a calm, almost lyrical tone. "This cloth is soft, see? It shines the wood, makes it happy. These flowers, they smell sweet. Would you like to smell?" Sometimes Ethan reached out, sometimes not. But his presence was undeniable. One afternoon, Maria found him back in the garage, circling the Aston Martin. She crouched beside him. "You know," she said gently, "cars are like people. They need care. You open their hearts here." She tapped the hood lightly. "And they breathe again." To her astonishment, Ethan placed his small hand on the same spot. Alexander, watching from the doorway, felt something twist inside him. A maid was doing what countless experts had failed to achieve. But part of him bristled too. Was she overstepping? Was this dangerous hope she was planting in his fragile son? The storm within that night, Alexander confronted her. "You seem to have gained his attention," he said, standing in the grand kitchen where only the hum of appliances filled the air. Maria looked up from the dishes she was washing. "I am only trying to be kind, sir." "Kindness doesn't cure autism," Alexander snapped more harshly than intended, her hands stilled in the suds. She turned, her gaze steady. "No, but kindness can reach a heart where force cannot." For a moment, silence stretched between them. Alexander, who faced down ruthless CEOs without flinching, found himself unable to hold the maid's unwavering eyes. He looked away first. "Don't give him false hope," he muttered, and left. But that night, long after he tried to sleep, Alexander replayed the sight of his son's hand resting on the hood of that car, mirroring Maria's, and it haunted him. A spark in the dark the next day brought rain. Thunder rolled over the estate, and the mansion's windows trembled under the storm's wrath. Ethan hated storms. They rattled him, made him retreat under tables or bury his head in pillows. When the first crack of thunder split the sky, Alexander hurried through the halls, searching for him. Panic clawed at his chest. "Ethan! Ethan, where are you?" He found him in the garage again, curled up beside the Aston Martin, hands clamped over his ears, rocking back and forth. Alexander knelt beside him, helpless. "Son, it's okay. It's okay." But his words bounced off the fortress of fear. Then Maria entered, her skirt damp from the rain she had braved to close the garden shutters. She knelt on Ethan's other side, her presence calm amidst the chaos. "Mi niño," she whispered. "Listen." She tapped the hood of the car gently. Tap, tap, tap. A steady rhythm. Ethan's rocking slowed. His wide eyes darted to her hands. "See? The storm is outside, but here we make our own sound. Tap, tap, safe." Ethan lifted one trembling hand and tapped the hood once, twice. The rhythm matched hers. Alexander's throat tightened. For the first time, his son was not retreating from the storm. He was facing it, guided by the maid's steady hands. The unthinkable hours later, when the storm subsided and the mansion grew quiet, Alexander found himself standing in the doorway of the small servants' quarters where Maria stayed. The room was modest compared to the luxury of the house. A narrow bed, a worn Bible on the nightstand, a single framed photograph of an older couple. Her parents, he guessed. She looked up, surprised to see him. "Sir?" He hesitated. The words felt foreign on his tongue. "Thank you. For today." Her smile was faint but genuine. It was Ethan who was brave. Something shifted between them in that moment, an unspoken acknowledgement of shared concern, of humanity beyond titles and roles. But before Alexander could respond, a shrill alarm pierced the air. Echoing through the mansion, it was the security system. Red lights flashed across the corridors. Somewhere glass shattered, Maria gasped. "What is happening?" Alexander's face hardened. "Someone has breached the property." He sprinted toward the hall, Maria following close behind. And in the chaos, one thought seared his mind. Where is Ethan? The mansion's corridors glowed red with the alarm's pulse. The sirens wailed, shrill and merciless, echoing against marble floors and crystal chandeliers. The Harrington estate, usually a fortress of order and silence, had been shaken to its core. Alexander thundered down the hallway, his long strides purposeful yet frantic, each step reverberating like gunfire. His voice tore through the house. "Ethan!" No answer. Only the shrieking alarm and the heavy patter of rain against the tall windows. Behind him, Maria clutched the wall for balance as she hurried after him. The storm outside seemed to seep into the mansion itself. Every shadow, every echo felt threatening. She had only been in this house for days, yet now her heart raced as though her own child were missing. Alexander stopped abruptly outside Ethan's room. The door was ajar. The curtains whipped violently in the wind where shattered glass littered the floor. "God," Alexander muttered, stepping inside. The boy's bed was empty. His toy cars lay scattered as though abandoned in haste. Maria gasped. "He's not here?" Alexander spun around, his eyes blazing with a mixture of fury and terror. "He's gone." The estate's private security team swarmed the grounds, their radios crackling with orders. Flashlights cut through the darkness of the gardens, beams darting across hedges and fountains. Dogs barked as handlers guided them toward the woods that bordered the property. "Seal the gates," Alexander barked into his phone. "No one leaves this estate until my son is found. Lock it down." He strode into the rain without hesitation, his tailored suit quickly drenched. Maria followed despite his sharp look of disapproval. "You should stay inside," he growled. "No," she said firmly, surprising herself. "He needs someone who can reach him. You know he listens to me." Alexander stopped for half a beat, his chest heaving. He wanted to argue, to order her back into the safety of the house. But deep down he knew she was right. Ethan had responded to her in ways no one else had managed. He gave a curt nod and pressed forward. The rain lashed at them, soaking their clothes, blinding their eyes. Somewhere in the stormy night, an 11-year-old boy was lost. The boy in the rain. They found him near the garage. Ethan sat on the wet concrete floor, knees drawn to his chest, rocking back and forth. His eyes were wide but distant, fixed on something only he could see. The broken glass from a window lay scattered nearby. He must have climbed out during the chaos. "Ethan!" Alexander rushed forward, kneeling in the rain. His large hands hovered uselessly over the boy, unsure whether to grab him or comfort him. But Ethan shrank back, flinching at his father's desperate movements. His lips parted and a sound escaped. Low, distressed, almost a whimper. Maria stepped in, placing a gentle hand on Alexander's arm. "Let me." She crouched slowly, lowering herself to Ethan's level. Her voice was barely louder than the rain. "Mi niño." "It's loud, isn't it? Too loud. But look, listen." She tapped the wrench Ethan had clutched from the garage floor. Tap, tap, tap. The boy's rocking slowed. His gaze flicked to the rhythm, his breathing hitching in time with it. "Safe," Maria whispered. "You are safe. Your papa is here, I am here. Only the rain, nothing else." Gradually, Ethan's trembling eased. He reached out a hand, hesitant, searching, and it brushed against Maria's sleeve. Alexander exhaled shakily, relief and confusion colliding in his chest. He had never seen anyone bring his son back from the edge so quickly. When the head of security rushed over, reporting that the alarm had been triggered by a broken sensor during the storm. Alexander barely listened. All that mattered was the boy in front of him. His boy, alive, safe, calmed not by him, but by the maid. The morning after. The storm passed, but the house carried its scars. Windows had been shattered, nerves frayed, trust shaken. Alexander stood in his office the next morning, exhausted yet restless. He had not slept. His eyes were red-rimmed, his jaw tight. The events of the night replayed mercilessly in his mind. His son missing. His helplessness, Maria's calm. A soft knock came at the door. "Enter," he said, his voice gravelly. Maria stepped in, wearing her simple uniform. Her hands folded nervously in front of her. "I wanted to check. Is Ethan all right?" Alexander studied her in silence for a long moment. She looked small in his towering office, swallowed by leather chairs and shelves of first-edition books. Yet last night she had been anything but small. She had been steady when he faltered. "He's fine," Alexander said curtly. Then softer. "Because of you," Maria lowered her gaze. "Any mother would have done the same." His chest tightened. Any mother. The word stabbed at the hollow where Isabella's absence still lived. "You are not his mother," he said, perhaps too harshly. "I know," she whispered, "but someone must stand with him when he is afraid." The silence that followed was thick, charged. Alexander wanted to dismiss her, to retreat back into the armor of wealth and authority. Yet he couldn't deny what he had witnessed. His son needed her, and that truth unsettled him. A father's fury later that day. Alexander sat with Ethan in the sunroom. The boy traced patterns on the glass window, oblivious to his father's presence. "Son," Alexander said quietly, "why do you pull away from me?" Ethan gave no sign of hearing. His small finger moved in endless circles. The ache in Alexander's chest deepened. He slammed his fist lightly against the armrest, startling even himself. "Damn it, Ethan! I'm your father. Why can't you let me in?" The words echoed, sharp and cruel. Ethan flinched, curling inward. "Sir!" Maria's voice cut from the doorway, alarmed. She rushed in, crouching protectively beside the boy. "Please, don't raise your voice." Alexander rose, towering over her. "You dare tell me how to speak to my own son?" Her eyes were steady, unwavering. "Yes, because I see the fear in his eyes. And I don't think that is what you want." For a moment, Alexander's face contorted with rage. How dare this maid, this outsider, lecture him in his own house? Yet beneath the fury lurked shame, because she was right. His outburst had only widened the chasm between him and his child. He turned away, his voice low, broken. "Leave us." Maria hesitated, then gently guided Ethan's hand away from the glass before retreating. She glanced back once, her expression filled not with defiance, but with quiet sorrow. Behind closed doors that night, Alexander poured himself another glass of whiskey in the study. His thoughts a storm of pride, anger, and despair. He had built empires, negotiated with world leaders, crushed competitors, yet he could not reach his own flesh and blood. And now a maid, a woman with no degrees or prestigious background, had stepped into the role he had failed to fill. It enraged him. It humbled him. It terrified him. The study door creaked. Ethan stood there, silent, clutching a small toy car in his hands. Alexander froze. The boy had never come to him on his own before. "Ethan?" His voice softened instinctively. Ethan stepped inside slowly, eyes flickering nervously toward the desk where Maria had placed tea the night before. He tapped the toy car against the wood, tap, tap, tap. Just as Maria had taught, Alexander's throat tightened. He understood then. Ethan wasn't coming to him. He was seeking her. The realization cut deeper than any business defeat ever could. A dangerous thought in the days that followed. Tension grew like a storm cloud between Alexander and Maria. Ethan gravitated to her presence, trailing her through the house, watching her work, responding to her gentle words. Alexander found himself both relieved and resentful. Relief that his son wasn't as unreachable as he once thought. Resentment that the bridge was not built by him. One evening, during a private dinner, Alexander confided in his longtime friend and attorney. "Charles Whitmore." "She's getting too close," Alexander muttered. Swirling his glass, Charles raised a brow. "The maid?" "Yes, Ethan listens to her. Follows her. It's unnatural." Or perhaps it's the first natural thing he's done in years, Charles countered. Alexander scowled. You think I should… What, trust her? I think, Charles said carefully, that you should be careful. If word gets out that your billion-dollar empire is being influenced by a maid, people will question your judgment. They'll see weakness, the word stung. Weakness, Alexander had built his life on eradicating it. Yet here it was, staring him down through the eyes of his son and the presence of a woman he barely knew. The cliff's edge one rainy afternoon, Alexander came home early from a tense board meeting. As he walked through the side garden, he froze at the sound of laughter, soft, melodic, unmistakable. He followed the sound and found them in the garage. Maria sat cross-legged on the floor beside the Aston Martin, grease smudged on her hands. Ethan knelt next to her, holding a small screwdriver. She guided his tiny hand toward a loose bolt, her voice encouraging. That's it, Nino. Turn slowly, see? We're fixing it. Ethan's lips parted and a sound escaped. Not just a whimper, not just a murmur, a laugh. Fragile, halting, but real. Alexander's heart slammed against his ribs. He hadn't heard his son laugh in years. He stepped forward, his shadow falling across them. What is this? Maria's head snapped up, startled. Ethan flinched, dropping the screwdriver. Alexander's voice was thunder. You are teaching my son to fix cars? Do you know the risk? Do you think this is your place? Maria rose slowly, meeting his fury with trembling hands but steady eyes. I think it is his place, because for the first time he feels proud of himself. Her words sliced through the storm of his anger. Ethan clutched the edge of Maria's skirt, his eyes wide, fearful of his father's wrath. Alexander's chest heaved as he looked at them, his son clinging to the maid standing like a shield. A sight that twisted his heart with rage, envy, and something deeper he dared not name. Cliffhanger. Alexander has caught Maria and Ethan in the garage, and his fury is about to change everything. A fragile breakthrough. The garage hung heavy with silence after Alexander's thunderous accusation. The faint ticking of the rain on the roof echoed the pounding of his pulse. Ethan clung desperately to Maria's skirt, his knuckles white, his body trembling. His small form seemed even smaller in the shadow of his father's fury. Alexander's voice, low but seething, filled the air. You will not interfere in how I raise my son. Do you understand? Maria swallowed hard. Her chest rose and fell with the weight of her courage. Sir, I do not mean disrespect. But Ethan, he laughed. Did you hear? He laughed. Alexander's jaw clenched. And what happens when he hurts himself? When your experiments backfire, will you be responsible then? Ethan whimpered at the harsh tone, burying his face in Maria's side. Maria instinctively crouched, wrapping an arm around the boy. She whispered in his ear, Shh, it's all right, mi niño. I am here. The sight, his son shrinking from him, seeking comfort in the maid, was unbearable. It was not just a wound to Alexander's pride. It was a knife driven into the tenderest part of him, his love as a father. Out, he growled. Both of you now. The punishment that evening, the mansion was cloaked in an icy tension. The staff whispered among themselves, exchanging anxious glances, for they had never seen Alexander so furious. Maria sat in her small room, trembling. She feared not for herself. She had endured harsher words in harder lives, but for Ethan, how would he weather his father's anger? Would the fragile trust he had begun to build crumble under fear? Her door opened without a knock. Alexander stood in the frame, his broad shoulders casting a long shadow. You will stay away from the garage, he ordered. His voice was calm now, but it was the kind of calm that chilled more than rage. And from my sons. Fixations. You are here to clean, not to play therapist. Maria rose to her feet, her hands clasped tightly. Sir, please. Ethan has found something that makes him shine. He is learning to focus, to try, to succeed. Why would you take that away from him? Alexander's eyes burned, but his voice cracked with pain he couldn't mask. Because every time I believe he's making progress, the fall is harder. I will not watch him break again. Maria's heart ached at the confession. She had seen fathers who were absent, fathers who were cruel. But Alexander was neither. His anger was born of fear, his coldness a mask for despair. Still, she whispered, or perhaps you fear yourself breaking. Alexander stiffened. His hand gripped the doorframe until his knuckles whitened. Without another word, he turned and left, leaving Maria trembling in the silence. Ethan withdraws. The next days were bleak. Ethan retreated once more into his shell. He avoided the garage, avoided even Maria, as though afraid of his father's wrath falling on her again. Maria tried gently. "Would you like to read with me today? Or water the garden?" But the boy only shook his head, eyes downcast. Alexander noticed too. He watched from a distance as his son drifted further into silence, his movements mechanical, his once bright spark dulled. At night, when the house was asleep, Alexander poured himself another drink. Staring at the flickering fire in the study, the truth gnawed at him. Had he stolen from his son the one thing that brought him joy? Conversation in the garden one afternoon. Maria stood by the fountain in the east garden, wringing out linens. The autumn wind carried the scent of damp earth and roses. Alexander approached silently, but she sensed him before he spoke. "You defy me," he said, his tone softer than before. She turned, startled. "I do not mean to defy. Only to help." He studied her. In the dappled sunlight, she looked fragile, yet her eyes held a strength that unsettled him. "You risk your position here. Do you realize that?" "Yes," she said simply. "Why?" His voice cracked. "Why do you care so much for a child not your own?" Maria hesitated, then answered, her words woven with memories. "Because once, when I was a girl, I had a brother like Ethan. He could not speak well, but he loved machines. Radios, clocks, anything that ticked. Our parents had no money for doctors, no patience for his silence. They called him broken, but I saw his heart. I saw how his face lit up when he fixed something. He was not broken, just different." Her voice faltered. "He died young, too soon. And I swore if ever I met another child like him, I would not let the world silence him." Alexander's breath caught. For the first time, he saw not just a maid, but a woman carved by loss, carrying wounds not unlike his own. But he masked the tremor in his chest with gruffness. "Stories don't change reality." Maria met his gaze steadily. "Sometimes they do." The first progress. That evening, Maria found Ethan sitting alone in the library, a toy car lined up against a stack of books. She sat near him, silent at first, respecting his space. Then gently she whispered, "Do you remember the car in the garage? The shiny one? If you like, we can just look at it." "No touching. Only looking." Ethan hesitated, his small fingers twitching. Then slowly he nodded. Maria's heart swelled. She guided him carefully step by step to the garage. Alexander, watching unseen from the corridor, held his breath. Inside, Ethan approached the Aston Martin. His reflection shimmered in its polished hood. For a long moment he only stared. Then timidly he placed his palm on the metal. Maria smiled. "See, it is waiting for you." Ethan's lips quivered. And then, barely audible, he whispered, "Car." Maria's eyes widened. Tears burned at the corners. She had heard him speak before, but never voluntarily, never with such clarity. Behind them, Alexander's knees nearly buckled. The word pierced him like sunlight breaking through storm clouds. His son, his silent son, had spoken. Father and son that night, Alexander stood outside Ethan's room, watching the boy sleep. His chest rose and fell in gentle rhythm, the toy car clutched in his small hand. Alexander whispered into the dark, though Ethan could not hear. "I don't know how to reach you, son, but I swear I will try." He turned away only to find Maria standing quietly in the hall. Their eyes met, heavy with unspoken truths. "He said a word tonight," Alexander whispered, his voice raw. Maria nodded, her own eyes glistening. "He is beginning to trust." "We must not stop now." For once, Alexander did not argue. He only nodded, the weight of pride and humility pressing down on him in equal measure. A spark of jealousy, but change is never welcomed by all. Among the household staff, whispers grew louder. The cook muttered that the maid was overstepping. The butler frowned at how often the master lingered near the servant girl. Even the head nurse, long frustrated with Ethan's silence, bristled with envy at Maria's success. One evening, Alexander overheard two maids whispering in the corridor. "She acts like she's the boy's mother. And the master. He watches her like he's forgotten who he is." Alexander's jaw tightened. He dismissed them coldly, but the words burrowed deep. Was he allowing himself to grow dependent on her? Was his son's progress truly hers, or was it chance? Doubt became his constant shadow. The dangerous dinner, to silence the whispers, Alexander decided on formality. He invited Maria to sit at the dining table, not as an equal, but as part of Ethan's evening routine. The grand dining hall, with its chandeliers and long polished table, felt oppressive. Ethan sat at one end, fiddling with his spoon. Alexander sat in the middle, Maria at his side. "Ethan," Maria coaxed gently, "this is soup. Warm good. Would you like to try?" To Alexander's astonishment, the boy lifted the spoon, awkwardly spilling half the broth, but he tried. Maria clapped softly. "Very good." Ethan's lips curved into the faintest smile. Alexander's throat tightened. "Well done, son," he said, his voice unsteady. For a brief, miraculous moment, they were a family. But then, Ethan's hand slipped, the spoon clattering loudly to the floor. The sound jolted him. His eyes widened, his chest heaved. He began to rock back and forth, panic rising. Maria reached out, but Alexander moved faster. "Ethan, stop, calm down." The sharpness of his tone shattered the fragile calm. Ethan screamed a piercing wail and bolted from the table. "Ethan!" Alexander called after him, but the boy was gone. Maria rose, her face pale. "You frightened him." Alexander slammed his fist on the table. "Do not tell me how to father my child." But even as his rage echoed through the hall, guilt gnawed at him. He had lost his temper. Again. The cliffhanger hours later, as the household finally quieted, Maria searched the mansion for Ethan. She found him not in his room, but in the garage, curled once more beside the Aston Martin. Fast asleep, she brushed a strand of hair from his forehead and whispered, "I won't leave you." But as she stood, she froze. At the far end of the garage, half hidden in shadow, Alexander was watching. His expression was unreadable, torn between gratitude, suspicion, and something far deeper. And in his eyes burned a question that would change everything. Was he losing his son to her? Or was he finally gaining him through her? Cliffhanger. Alexander watches Maria and Ethan in the garage, his heart at war with itself. Whispers and wounds. The days that followed were a strange mixture of light and shadow. Ethan, though still fragile, began to take more steps forward. He spoke a word here and there. Car, blue, light. Sometimes, when Maria hummed softly while folding linens, he would sit near her, swaying gently to the rhythm as if comforted by her presence. For Alexander, each tiny miracle was a revelation and a torment. He would watch from a distance as his son connected, laughed, and even attempted small gestures of affection. Yet every time the bond was not with him, but with the maid. Whispers among the staff grew into murmurs. She is overstepping. She is making the master look weak. Perhaps she has her eyes on more than the child. Rumors spread like ivy across the estate, twisting their way into the cracks of Alexander's already burdened mind. The accusation, one morning. Charles Whitmore, Alexander's closest friend and attorney, paid a visit. They sat in the library, the scent of old leather and pipe smoke filling the air. "You must tread carefully," Charles said, his sharp eyes scanning Alexander's weary face. "This maid, Maria, she is drawing attention." Alexander frowned. "Attention?" "From the staff, from outsiders. Do you not see how it looks? A billionaire's son, suddenly responsive, but only to a servant girl. And you watching her like a hawk. People are talking." Alexander's jaw tightened. "They can talk all they like. She has done more for Ethan than all the so-called experts I've hired." Charles leaned forward. "And what if it is manipulation? What if she is exploiting his condition to secure her place? You are a man with an empire, Alex. There are vultures who would gladly use your son as leverage." The words hit like a blow. The seed of doubt, already planted, began to sprout. Later that day, as Maria and Ethan sat in the garage tinkering with toy tools, Alexander entered abruptly. His eyes were cold, his voice sharp. "What exactly are you doing here?" Maria looked up, startled. "We are only playing, sir." "He wanted to fix this. Fix?" Alexander's tone was cutting. "Or control?" Ethan flinched at the harshness. Maria instinctively shielded him with her arm. "I would never." Alexander's voice rose. "And yet somehow my son listens only to you. Do you take me for a fool?" The silence was suffocating. Maria's eyes shimmered with hurt, but she said nothing more. Ethan buried his face in her shoulder, trembling, and Alexander, seeing his son recoil not from the maid but from him, felt the full weight of his accusation crushing his own heart. Maria's resolve that night. Maria knelt in her small room, hands clasped tightly around her worn Bible. Tears slid down her cheeks as she whispered into the silence, "Dios mío. Give me strength, not for me, for Ethan. Let me protect him, even if it costs me everything." Her mind drifted back to her brother, the boy with gentle hands who had died too young. She had failed him, powerless to shield him from the harshness of a world that did not understand. She would not fail Ethan. She could not. The illness 2 weeks later, crisis struck. Ethan grew feverish one morning, his skin clammy, his eyes glassy. He lay limp in bed, murmuring faintly, his toy cars untouched at his side. The private nurse examined him quickly. "He has a high fever, Mr. Harrington. We should take him to the hospital immediately." Alexander's chest constricted. His son's frail body, normally restless with small motions, lay frighteningly still. Panic clawed at him. Maria hovered at the bedside, her hands trembling. "I will go with him," she whispered. Alexander shot her a look, his voice harsh with fear. "No, you've done enough." But Ethan's hand stirred weakly, reaching not for his father, not for the nurse, but for Maria. Alexander's breath caught. His own son, in illness, in weakness, still sought her. Against every instinct of pride, he muttered through clenched teeth, "Fine, come." The hospital, the sterile brightness of the hospital, was a world away from the grandeur of the Harrington estate. Machines beeped, nurses bustled, and the scent of antiseptic filled the air. Ethan lay on a narrow bed, an IV in his arm, his face pale against the white sheets. Alexander sat rigid in the chair, his eyes fixed on the monitors. Maria sat on the other side, holding Ethan's hand gently, humming a lullaby under her breath. Hours stretched like years. Alexander's mind spiraled with guilt. He thought of every harsh word, every time he had raised his voice, every time he had stood outside Ethan's world instead of stepping inside. At one point, exhausted, he rose and stepped into the corridor. He leaned against the wall, pressing a hand to his temple. Charles arrived, ever the advisor. "How is he?" "Not good," Alexander admitted hoarsely. Charles's gaze hardened. "And the maid? She is with him." Charles's lips thinned. "Be careful, Alex. In times of crisis, attachments grow stronger. Do not let her weave herself too tightly into your life." Alexander didn't answer. For the first time, his friend's words rang hollow. A night of truth. That night, Maria dozed lightly in the chair beside Ethan's bed, her hand still clasped around his. Alexander watched them in silence. Finally, he spoke softly into the dim room. "Why him?" Maria stirred, blinking awake. "Sir, why does he choose you?" "Why not me? I am his father." Her eyes softened. "Because you are his father. You carry his fear as well as his love. He feels your anger, your desperation. With me, there is no expectation. Only patience." Alexander's throat tightened. "Do you think I do not love him?" "I think," she said gently, "you love him so fiercely it frightens him. Sometimes love must be gentle to be heard." For a long moment, Alexander said nothing. Then, in a voice scarcely above a whisper, "I don't know how." Maria reached across Ethan's bed and placed her hand lightly on Alexander's. "Then let us learn together." The contact lingered, charged with unspoken emotion. And in the silence, Alexander realized how dangerous this maid had become. Not because she threatened his empire, but because she threatened the walls around his heart. The recovery by morning, Ethan's fever broke. He stirred weakly, whispering a word that made both adults freeze. "Papa." Alexander's breath caught. His eyes filled with tears he hadn't shed in years. He leaned close, brushing his son's damp hair from his forehead. "I'm here, son. I'm here." It was the first time Ethan had ever called him by name. Maria smiled faintly, though her own eyes glistened. In that moment, all her sacrifice felt worth it. The backlash, but back at the mansion, the whispers became open hostility. The nurse, bitter at being overshadowed, approached Alexander in private. "Sir, with respect, that maid is dangerous. She encourages unhealthy attachments. It is not professional. It is manipulation." Others echoed the claim. She spends too much time alone with the boy. She undermines your authority. Perhaps she has other motives. The poison of rumor seeped into Alexander's weary mind. His gratitude clashed violently with suspicion. Could it be true? Was Maria a savior or a threat? That evening he confronted her once more. "I hear things," he said coldly. "Accusations. People believe you are exploiting Ethan, that you are exploiting me." Maria's face went pale. "Sir, I would never." His voice was sharp, echoing the accusation from weeks ago. "Then tell me, why do you spend more time with him than anyone else? Why does he cling to you as though you are his mother?" Her voice trembled but held firm. "Because I do not give up on him. Because I see him. Not his silence, not his illness, not his differences. I see him. Can you say the same?" The words struck deep. Alexander's hands shook with fury, not at her, but at himself. Yet pride sealed his lips. "Enough," he said, his voice like steel. "You will keep your distance. If you cannot obey, you will leave." Ethan, standing quietly in the doorway, heard every word. His eyes filled with tears, and without a sound, he turned and fled. The cliffhanger. By the time Alexander realized his son was gone, the house was in uproar. Check the gardens. Search the garage. Maria's heart raced as she darted through the halls. She knew where he would go. She knew. She ran into the stormy night toward the old service road beyond the estate, and there, illuminated by lightning, stood Ethan, barefoot, clutching a wrench in his small hands, dangerously close to the busy road beyond the gates. "Ethan!" Maria screamed. From behind her, Alexander's voice roared, "My God, no!" The storm swallowed their cries as Ethan stepped forward, the headlights of an approaching truck bearing down. Cliffhanger. Ethan is about to step into the road, Maria and Alexander racing to reach him. The impossible. The storm howled like a living thing, ripping leaves from trees, bending branches low, drumming against the Harrington estate like fists demanding entry. Thunder shook the sky, and rain lashed the earth until the gravel drive gleamed like glass. Ethan stood at the edge of the service road, his small body shivering, his wrench clutched tightly in trembling fingers. The glare of headlights bore down on him, growing larger, brighter, merciless. "Ethan!" Maria's voice cracked the night. Alexander's heart seized. He had built empires, stared down ruthless competitors, commanded boardrooms filled with sharks. But never had he known terror like this. The sight of his fragile son about to be devoured by the storm, and the steel beast rushing toward him. The rescue Maria sprinted, her shoes slipping on the soaked ground. She lunged, arms outstretched, just as the truck screeched its horn. Alexander, running from the opposite side, felt his soul tear in half. At the last possible moment, Maria scooped Ethan into her arms and tumbled onto the wet grass. The truck roaring past with a blast of water and exhaust. Silence followed, broken only by the pounding rain and Ethan's ragged breaths. Maria clutched the boy tightly, her body shaking. "Mi niño, mi cielo." "You're safe." Alexander stumbled toward them, his knees giving way in the mud as he gathered both son and Maid into his arms. His chest heaved with sobs he could not control. "Ethan, Ethan," his voice broke, raw, unguarded. I thought I lost you." Ethan's eyes, wide and shimmering, darted between his father and Maria, and then, like the faintest crack of dawn, his lips parted. "Papa." The word was clear. Stronger than before, Alexander froze, his tears mingling with rain. Slowly, as though afraid to frighten the moment away, he cupped Ethan's face. "I'm here, son. I'm here." Maria's breath caught. It was happening, the impossible. The first laugh back inside. The household buzzed with panic and relief. Servants whispered about the scene, but Alexander paid them no mind. His world was narrowed to one: Ethan. Wrapped in blankets, Ethan sat on the couch, Maria beside him, Alexander kneeling at his feet. A fire blazed, throwing golden light across their faces. For the first time, Alexander noticed Ethan's gaze linger on him, not fleeting, not evasive, but steady. Then, as Maria handed Ethan a toy car to comfort him, something extraordinary happened. Ethan rolled it once across the couch cushion, looked at his father, and gave a sound that froze both adults in place. A laugh. It was faint, Fragile but unmistakable. Alexander covered his mouth, trembling. He laughed. His voice cracked. "My God, Maria," he laughed. Maria's eyes brimmed with tears. She reached for Ethan's hand. "Sí, mi amor." "You laughed." The boy laughed again, brighter this time, as though the sound had been hiding in him all along, waiting for this moment of breaking storm and breaking silence. Alexander's transformation. The days that followed were unlike anything Alexander had ever known. He found himself at Ethan's side constantly, learning how to hold the toy wrench, how to roll toy cars back and forth, how to hum softly when Ethan grew restless. And Maria was always there, guiding him gently, teaching him what patience looked like. For the first time, Alexander Harrington, the man who had always measured worth in profit and power, was willing to be a student. One evening, as the three of them sat in the garage with the hood of an old car lifted, Maria placed a small bolt in Ethan's hand and said softly, "Turn it here, Corazon." "Like this." Ethan obeyed, fumbling slightly but managing to twist the bolt. He looked up wide-eyed, as though seeking approval. Alexander leaned forward, smiling with tears shining in his eyes. "That's perfect, Ethan. Perfect." The boy's lips curved upward in the faintest, most delicate smile, and Alexander's heart, hardened for decades, shattered. The backlash returns. But joy was short-lived. Charles visited again, his face stern, his words biting. "Alex, you're blind. The maid has bewitched you. Don't you see? This is dangerous. She's making herself indispensable. Soon people will say she controls you through your son." Alexander bristled. "Enough, Charles. No, listen to me. Your empire is at risk. Investors are already whispering about your distractions. You cannot let sentiment ruin you, ruin me." Alexander's eyes burned. "Do you not see what has happened? My son, my silent, unreachable son, has spoken to me. He has laughed. And you dare tell me it is a risk?" Charles's voice lowered, venomous. "Yes, because it is not you he depends on. It is her." The words stabbed deep. Even in the glow of progress, Alexander felt the old wound of pride flare. Was it true? Was Ethan's laughter truly for him, or only because Maria had made it possible? That night, he stood by Ethan's bed as the boy slept peacefully. Maria lingered in the doorway. "You changed him," Alexander said softly, not turning. "No," Maria whispered. "He changed. He found the courage himself. I only held the light." Alexander faced her, conflict raging in his eyes. "And what happens when the world says this light does not belong here? That you are a servant, not his mother?" Maria's chin lifted, her voice steady. "Then let the world say what it will. I did not come here for the world. I came here for him." For a moment, Alexander's heart longed to bridge the distance between them, but fear and pride held him back. The secret meeting. One evening, as Maria walked back from the garden, she overheard voices in the servants' quarters. The nurse and two maids were speaking in hushed, bitter tones. "She thinks she's mistress of the house. The master spends more time with her than with anyone else. If we don't stop her, she'll replace us all." Maria's chest tightened. She turned quietly and walked away, but the words clung to her like thorns. She knew what would come next. Whispers turned to poison, poison turned to action, and she was right. The next morning, Alexander received an anonymous letter on his desk. It accused Maria of deliberately endangering Ethan during the storm to make herself appear heroic. The words burned. She put him in danger. She staged the rescue. She cannot be trusted. Alexander's hands shook as he crushed the paper, fury and doubt colliding inside him. The confrontation that evening. He found Maria in the garage with Ethan, teaching him how to polish a car hood. Enough of this charade. Alexander's voice thundered. Maria flinched, Ethan recoiling at the volume. "Sir?" she asked quietly. He held up the crumpled letter. "Do you take me for a fool? Was it not enough to win my son? Must you also try to manipulate me with staged heroics?" Maria's eyes widened with horror. "No! I swear on my life, I would never put him in danger." "Then how did he end up on that road? Who was watching him?" Tears welled in her eyes. "He ran when he heard us arguing. He ran because he felt your anger. Do you not see? He is more aware than you realize." The truth in her words pierced him, but pride screamed louder. "I cannot allow this any longer," Alexander said coldly. "Pack your things. You will leave tomorrow. Ethan, silent until then, suddenly cried out. His small voice, trembling but forceful, broke through the air like lightning. No. Both adults froze. Ethan stood, fists clenched, tears streaming down his face. No, Maria, no go. Alexander's breath caught. The impossible had happened again. His son was speaking, not a single word, but a plea. Maria pressed a hand to her mouth, sobbing. Alexander staggered back, the walls of his pride collapsing around him. He stared at his son, who was finally, desperately, unmistakably reaching for him. Ethan. His voice cracked. The boy stumbled forward, clutching Alexander's sleeve. Papa, no. Maria. The billionaire, who had thought himself untouchable, sank to his knees on the garage floor. He gathered his son into his arms, trembling with a grief and joy too vast to name. And over Ethan's shoulder, his tear-filled eyes met Maria's cliffhanger for the first time. Alexander Harrington realized the truth. Without Maria, his son's light might never have broken through the darkness. But as that realization dawned, the door to the garage slammed open. Charles stood there, flanked by two men in dark suits. Alex, Charles said grimly, this has gone far enough. For the sake of your empire and your son, she must be removed tonight. Maria's eyes widened in shock. Ethan clung tighter to his father, shaking his head. And Alexander, torn between loyalty to his empire and love for his son, felt the weight of the greatest decision of his life pressing down. Cliffhanger. Charles and his men are ready to force Maria out. Alexander must choose, his empire or his son's fragile miracle. The resolution. The garage seemed to shrink beneath the weight of what was about to happen. The storm had passed outside, leaving the night thick with silence, but inside, tension crackled sharper than lightning. Charles stood framed in the doorway, his polished shoes gleaming against the oil-stained floor. Two men loomed behind him, shadows in tailored suits, their faces expressionless. Alex, Charles said, his tone measured but laced with steel. This is the end of it. You've let this maid crawl too far into your life. Into your son's life. She must go. Maria stood protectively beside Ethan, her trembling hands shielding him, though she knew she had no power against men like these. Her eyes flicked to Alexander, searching, pleading, and Ethan clung to his father's sleeve, his small voice breaking in desperate repetition. No. Papa, no, Maria. No, go. Alexander's breaking point. The words echoed like hammers in Alexander's chest. For years he had longed to hear his son speak, to hear his voice cut through the silence. And now that it had, the boy's very first plea was not for toys, not for comfort, but for her. Charles stepped forward. Do you hear this, Alex? Do you not see? He is confused. She has poisoned his mind, made him dependent. If you do not end this now, it will ruin him, and you. Alexander rose slowly, his tall frame casting a long shadow across the garage floor. His eyes locked on Charles, burning with a fire rarely seen outside boardrooms and battlefields. No, he said, his voice steady. Charles blinked. What? I said no. She stays. Maria gasped softly, Ethan's grip tightening around his father's hand. Charles's face hardened. You're making a mistake. Everything you've built, your reputation, your company, it will collapse under scandal. Do you want to be remembered as the billionaire who gave his empire away for a servant girl's pity tricks? Alexander stepped forward, his voice rising, fierce and unyielding. I want to be remembered as the father who finally saw his son. If that costs me my empire, so be it. The words hung in the air, reverberating like thunder. Charles's departure. For a long, tense moment, Charles stared, his lips pressed into a thin line. The men at his side shifted uneasily. Finally, Charles exhaled, his tone icy. So this is it. You've let sentiment blind you, very well. But when the board turns on you, when the vultures descend, do not expect me to shield you. Without another word, he turned on his heel and stalked away, his men following like shadows. The door slammed shut, leaving only the sound of Alexander's ragged breathing and Ethan's quiet sobs. Maria sank onto the workbench, her body shaking from the confrontation. Alexander crossed to her, his hand hovering awkwardly before finally resting gently on her shoulder. I'm sorry, he said hoarsely, for doubting you, for hurting you, for everything. Tears welled in her eyes, but she shook her head. No, sir. You have nothing to be sorry for. You were only protecting what you love. Alexander's gaze softened. And yet what I love was slipping away because I was blind. A father's lesson that night. Alexander made a decision that shocked the household. He called the staff together in the great hall. His son standing shyly at his side, Maria hovering protectively behind. The chandeliers blazed overhead, but the atmosphere was heavy with unease. You have all served me faithfully, Alexander began, his voice carrying through the cavernous room. But some among you have forgotten what true loyalty means. Loyalty is not measured in whispers or letters or schemes. It is measured in love, and tonight I declare this. Maria is no mere servant. She is part of this family. Gasps rippled through the staff. The nurse flushed red. The maids exchanged startled glances. Alexander's voice grew firmer. If anyone cannot respect her place here, you may leave tonight. This house is not built on fear or suspicion. It will be built on love. For my son above all. For the first time in years, Alexander felt the weight of his empire lift from his shoulders. He had spoken not as a billionaire, but as a father. Ethan's gift weeks passed and spring returned, washing the estate in blossoms and golden light. Ethan blossomed too. His words came slowly but surely. Car, Papa, Maria, Blue, Light. Each one was a treasure. Each one a miracle. One afternoon, as they worked in the garage, Ethan carefully tightened a bolt on the old car's engine. He turned to Alexander, his brow furrowed in concentration. Papa. Help? Alexander's heart swelled. He guided Ethan's small hands together, twisting the bolt into place. When it was done, Ethan looked up, his face breaking into a radiant smile. And then, clear as a bell, he spoke the words Alexander had longed for all his life. I love you, Papa. Alexander's knees gave out. He pulled his son into his arms, sobbing openly. Clutching him as though he would never let go, Maria, watching from the corner, pressed a trembling hand to her lips, her own tears streaming. For the first time, Alexander Harrington, the man who had conquered markets and crushed rivals, felt truly victorious. Recognition one evening. As the sun set in a blaze of gold over the estate, Alexander invited Maria to the drawing room. She entered nervously, her hands clasped, uncertain of his intentions. He stood by the window, silhouetted against the fading light. When he turned, his expression was softer than she had ever seen. Maria, he began, you came into this house as a maid, but you have given me more than service. You have given me my son. You have given me my life back. Her eyes widened, her lips parting. Sir, he stepped closer, his voice thick with emotion. I cannot repay you, but I can honor you. From this day forward, you are not my servant. You are Ethan's guardian, his teacher, his family. Tears slipped down Maria's cheeks. She bowed her head. I only wanted to help him, to give him the chance my brother never had. Alexander reached gently, lifting her chin. And in doing so, you healed us both. Their eyes met. And though no words of love were spoken, something deeper passed between them, something unbreakable. The public reckoning. When whispers of scandal reached the business world, Alexander did not hide. He held a press conference, Ethan at his side, Maria behind them. My son is my greatest treasure, he declared to the cameras. And this woman you call a maid is the reason he smiles today. She is not a scandal, she is a miracle. The story spread like wildfire. Headlines changed from rumor to reverence. Billionaire father credits Maid for son's breakthrough. Investors who had once doubted him saw strength instead of weakness. For the first time, Alexander's empire was not just admired, it was respected. Final scene on a warm summer evening. The Harrington estate echoed with laughter, the most precious sound of all. In the garden, Ethan ran clumsily but joyfully across the grass, a toy wrench clutched in his hand. Alexander chased after him, laughter spilling from his lips. His tailored suit jacket discarded, his heart finally free. Maria watched from the veranda, her smile radiant, her eyes shimmering. For the first time in years, the house felt alive. As Ethan ran into his father's arms, giggling uncontrollably, Alexander looked up at Maria. Their eyes met across the garden, bound by gratitude, by sacrifice, by love unspoken but undeniable. The billionaire had caught the maid teaching his son how to fix a car. But in truth, she had fixed far more: his broken heart, his lost hope, his fractured family, and together, they had achieved the impossible. Closing lessons: sometimes, miracles do not come from wealth or power, but from patience, kindness, and the courage to see the soul behind the silence. For love, gentle, persistent love, can mend even the most unreachable hearts.